Well, hey there, everybody. We're on week 5. Hey, we're over the hump and down, sliding to the end. How about that? For me, it always seems like it goes pretty fast, and it probably does for you too. I guess that is indicative of the busyness that we have going on these days, that life just seems to cruise by pretty fast. So week 5 already. And in week 5, we are looking at another, what I feel like is a really important concept in this whole idea of wholeness. And, it kind of goes off last week's conversations and really, kind of takes us to a hopefully further understanding. And the way these concepts are building through the course is hopefully making sense a little bit by now as they kind of fit together. But the topic for this week in week 5 is true self, and it is as opposed to our false self or our separate self. And the readings for this week, we get to read James Martin's book, where he writes about Thomas Merton, mostly about Thomas Merton. So if you're not familiar with James Martin, this guy's kind of a rock star Jesuit. He has written many books, lots of books about just the Jesuits and explaining who and what they believe in the Jesuits are. And he has a fantastic writing style. And so in here, though, one of the reasons I like this, though, is because he writes about Thomas Merton, too. And if you haven't been exposed to or read any of his material, it's just a great little introduction and complement to all the great work that Thomas Merton has done. He's a Trappist monk that died many years ago, but had a great influence on a lot of folks during his time. He was a fantastic writer and influencer back in the day when it was way before social media. Anyway, I really like this book to kind of give us an idea and a flavor in lots of ways about what true self and false self are. And it also is complementary to the Center for Action and Contemplation's daily reflections on this topic. So those are the other readings for this week. And those are always, I feel like, a good place to start because Father Richard writings are so easy to understand. He takes very complex topics and makes them easy for the rest of us to kind of wrap our heads around. So I always enjoy reading those reflections, and really anything that guy has written is fantastic to kind of grab a hold of. So I felt like those were good to kind of set the table for this whole idea of where we're going in this class. Because when we think about, sometimes it's easier to start talking about what the true, the false self or the separate self is, to kind of then understand maybe what our true self is. And some of the things that Father Richard says about the separate self makes sense to me. So anytime, as he says in many places, anytime we're thinking of ourselves as being separate from others, where we try to say, well, I'm not them, or I'm, superior to others, where, I feel like I'm a little bit, better than maybe somebody else, or separate, superior than other people, we're really acting out of our separate self. And that is then not in the direction of our true self. And our true self is our self that is our God self, our not that we are gods, but this person of who we are truly at our core, that is one connected, one with God. And when we're acting, separate and superior to those around us, we're separating ourselves, and so we don't have that connectedness. We're not building off this notion of relationship and relationality that it feels like is really at our core, that unites us, makes us who we are as a whole. And so again, as most of these concepts have been in this course, it takes a little bit to sit with those, and how does that make sense for me in the way I live my life, and then how does that tie into these concepts in this course of looking at my personal well-being, my leadership style, and how I interact with other people, and is it contributing to my stress that's causing other issues? Those are the big concepts that we try to latch our holism piece onto so that we can have some application. The separate self, I think one of the things that's important to understand about this is it's not where, and others have been very clear about this, this concept of being separated from others, separated from ourselves, separated from God, where we try to make ourselves, feel like we are, up here. And this is very similar to you see the similarities with dualism, as we talked about last week. But it's not where we say, okay, I have to get rid of all of that and only live out of my true self. That's probably impossible to do. I think the way our humanity is shaped is that part of our wholeness is our separate self, and accepting that is part of who I am, in addition to my true self, is probably moving us closer to this idea of wholeness. But the point to remember to that is, relative to the separate self, is to not take ourselves so seriously. Examples for that in my life would be really tying myself to a title like Dr. Lenz or Professor Lenz, or Pharmacist Lenz, or those, or being connected with a university professor, Creighton University, tenured. If I take those things too seriously, then I'm working out of my separate self. Those things that put me separate and superior to perhaps other people. But those are also very necessary components of my life. So I need to be Professor Lenz at time and put a hat on and to do that job, or Pharmacist Lenz, or whatever, or a representative of Creighton University. Those are very important parts of who I am, and but at the same time, I can't take those things so seriously that it separates me, that it moves away from relationship. So anything that we have, that we identify ourselves with, that we attach a label to, that then makes us feel like we're separate or superior to other people and to other things, that disconnects us with this notion of wholeness. It doesn't tie us to other people. It doesn't unify. We don't have that relationality, this exchange between us and others that flows back and forth. That's a separation there, and that cuts off that unity. And so if we can, have this foot in both camps, we can balance the idea of what's my identity as a person? What are the things that make me who I am, these individual uniquenesses that I have, that I don't quite take so seriously that it supersedes my views of who other people are and how I am positioned and relate to other people. So in my understanding of these concepts of true self, when I am moving towards others, when I'm moving towards relationship, when I'm moving towards nature or God, or my family or my friends or my students, or anyone, then I'm moving more towards my true self. When I'm moving away and I say, well, you don't know what I know, and I'm going to tell you what you should know. That's probably moving away from my true self and acting out more out of ego and disconnection and dualism and separateness. So I think that's a basic understanding of this. Of course, there are many layers, but one of the concepts too, without getting into too much detail about this, that is so helpful for all of this is to understand what so if you're a Christian and you have read some of the readings in the Bible about Jesus teaching about dying to self, this is really what a lot of what he was talking about is letting go of this egoic, separate self and becoming more unified with all that exists, and to see how there is no separation between us and others. There's really a oneness that exists. Us and others, us and God, us and nature, us and ourselves, that there is just really one unbroken, unified wholeness that exists. And so in order to move in that direction, there are some layers we have to let go of. And those layers include these labels that we attach ourselves to. This is me, this is my identity. And I'm gonna grip and hold on to that thing as tightly as I can, because otherwise I don't know who I am if I'm not this, right? That thing that you're holding on to, that thing that you're so tightly clinging to. And when we're in that mode, it's just not possible for us to be truly relational with other people. There is always going to be a barrier there. But as I said earlier, some of that is necessary. I mean, we do have to wear those hats sometime. It's just, not taking ourselves quite so darn seriously about the whole thing. About this whole thing, meaning life. But if we can then start to let go, okay, we can start to let go of some of these things that we cling to so tightly, that we feel like give us our identity of who we are. If we can start to let go of those with also retaining and knowing who you are and your identity, it's trying to do both at the same time. But if we can start to let go of those types of things, then that's what is the dying to self means, and we are moving closer to our true self, to God, and also then realizing how awesome that is, and that the moving in that direction, the letting go of the things that we feel like feel so good, like this degree that says in my job setting that I'm Dr. Lenz, that if I can let go of that and not take that so seriously, boy, that's a lot of freedom. And you can only experience that if you can start to let that go. And so that's then where the how do we start doing that? And then there's lots of conversations about that, and that gets into contemplative practice, as we read about in the Posturing Towards Wholeness book, those examples that I put in the last chapter about practicing contemplation. That is really the whole point of the centering prayer, is that practice, that daily practice of putting ourselves in a position of stillness, and when thoughts enter your mind, that you just passively just say, just let them go, and just have a joyous letting them go. That's all practice for letting go of these other layers that seem to grip us and consume us and make us divisive and dualistic and have us have feuds with other people that have other opinions than us. Certainly are moving away rather than towards that relationality. And so that's really the point of that in the book. And hopefully you pick that up, is to be able to practice that letting go. The letting go theme is all the way through the Gospels of just keep going, letting it go. And ultimately that, you're practicing, as some people have said, you're practicing dying all the time if you're doing that. And then, when the big D comes, then it's really not that big of a deal, because you understand that and realize that there's such a unification with all things that the next phase really is just a next phase, and I'm still connected and unified with all that is, and that it's okay because I've let go so many times, I've died to myself so many times that the physical death really isn't that big of a deal. And I think that's a lot of what Richard Rohr writes about, Father Rohr, about moving into the second half of life and moving towards that. There's such a happiness and joy to folks as they age when that is part of who they are and part of the practices of who they are. Rather than a lot of people, unfortunately, as they get older, they hold on tighter. And they keep squeezing tighter and clinging ever so tightly because there's a fear of letting go and fear of what's next. But if you start practicing that as you go, then you realize that it's really not that big of a deal. And the big bonus is that there's a tremendous amount of freedom by letting go and not holding on and not clinging to all those things that make us separate and superior and dualistic. And so, the reason that this is in this course, the reason that this is all in this program, is that when we start down that path, that's really a transformative path towards well-being, and it moves beyond the idea of tinkering to improve our health and well-being. And the tinkering practices, as I've said so many times, are absolutely necessary. The getting our exercise and eating right and getting enough sleep and all of those things that are really important for our health and well-being. But they are tinkering. They're not in and of themselves transformative. But hopefully, as you can see, if you move down this path of letting go, that's transformation towards a whole new way of seeing. In my mind, that moves us a lot closer to what I feel like wellness and well-being is. And in some ways, sometimes I joke about it, and some people it's a little bit offensive, I think, to some people, but a lot of the messaging that Jesus and others have said along the way is there, Jesus essentially a wellness coach telling us the path. I mean, a health and wellness coach, doesn't do it for you. They just show you the way, and you do the work yourself. And that makes a lot of sense for me on so many of the teachings and readings of Jesus. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Again, these videos get a little bit long because I feel like they need to have a bit of explanation with them. And so hopefully you'll enjoy the reading this week and be able to reflect on what this means for you in your own personal well-being and also in your leadership style and how you interact with other people and lead other people and see other people in this way. This is all really important stuff. And when you get into conflict negotiation and resolution as a leader, understanding true self and false self is really kind of a cool way to look at it, that most people are in conflict and, adversarial with each other because there's this separate self, this clinging, this need to protect that's going on there, and realizing that we're all in the same boat and we all have the same feelings and issues of our inner talk that go on. That it's really where it's coming from, and if we can let go and move in that direction, then that really, I feel like, can help us in a leadership role for sure. So that's why it's here too, for that piece of it. Anyway, okay, so I'm looking forward to reading your reflection papers and your discussions as usual. If you have any questions, just reach out, let me know. Thanks.